Yeah, I've just started recording.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry for disturbing, man.
That's okay. So the great thing, if you've got a simple Series 9030 application and you want to upgrade, then as you say, all you need to do is replace the chassis. So we have new backplanes, which are very similar in size. The new backplanes have both a new connector for high-speed modules, but they also have the legacy serial connector as well. So you can plug in the existing I/O modules into the new backplane. Now we've got a new power supply with higher capacity. We've got new CPUs, which include better cybersecurity, more memory, more programming capabilities. But these CPUs, they can run the existing Logic Master applications when they're migrated via Pack Machine Edition. And then you can continue to use those existing modules. So a lot of the time, these upgrades are very straightforward. You just take out the chassis, you unbolt it from the backplane, from whatever it's in, the panel. You put the new chassis in, you replace the power supply and CPU. You take the existing I/O modules, which means you preserve the I/O wiring, and those existing I/O modules will plug directly into the backplane. So this is a really straightforward upgrade, and we get a lot of these. Yeah, we're still doing these. Even after many years, we're still finding Series 9030 PLCs in the field, and it's easy to upgrade. Another nice feature is if there is an I/O module failure, we can replace those old I/O modules with new versions. So Series 9030 was using black plastic, but the RX3i is using blue plastic. But some of those old I/O modules, we've got new versions of those in blue plastic, but they're 100% compatible with the old modules, even the terminal block. So you don't need to do any rewiring. You can remove the old terminal block and put it on a new module in a new chassis, or even put those new modules into the old chassis and they will continue to work. So if someone comes across a Series 9030, generally it's very easy to modernize. Okay, so I've got a few more notes here. It's a new chassis, CPU and power supply. Generally, they've got the same mounting holes. The only thing I find there is on the 12-slot chassis, our new 12-slot chassis is very slightly wider on the right-hand side. And that was a problem for people that didn't listen to our cooling guidelines. Sometimes they have to shuffle things about on the panel. But for most of the applications, you can just take out the old 9030 chassis and plug in a new chassis, and it will even fit on the same mounting hole. So you don't even have to drill new holes in the panel. It just fits in the same space. As I said there, you can keep the existing I/O modules. We also support some communication modules like our Genius bus controller. So if you're using that for I/O expansion, you can keep that. There's also possibilities there to upgrade and use new I/O networks. We can come on to Genius in a minute. So nice things about the application code. It's the same memory structure, the same logic program support. All the original programs will run as long as it's ladder logic. You don't need to do anything. If you've got SFC, and very few people use this, SFC is like a function chart language, that one must be rewritten. And there were very few people who wrote C blocks, and in that case, the C blocks must be recompiled for the RX3i. But they're very minor use cases. It's very rare to come across those. So generally, it's very easy to change the target in Pack Machine Edition, download to the new CPU, and you can do this very quickly. There are people who change over a lunch break. They're running a Series 9030 before lunch. During the lunch break, when everyone is not using the machines, they turn them off, replace the hardware, and you're back up and running after lunch. And again, it's low risk because you're using the same I/O modules. If anything goes wrong, you can just put the original Series 9030 back into place. HMI SCADA isn't changed either because you've got the same addressing there. So again, nice and easy. So the only times this becomes problematic is if you've got lots of serial communications. They will need addressing. We've got a new serial communication module, but some of the protocols are very slightly different and the wiring is different. So you might need to make an adapter. But generally, if it's a straightforward Series 9030, it's very easy to upgrade. Now, we also sold quite a lot of Series 9070 systems. So 9070 is a much larger system. It was about double the size, or twice the height of a Series 9030, and about twice as deep. So almost 4 times the size, really. This was used for larger applications. This was originally launched in 1989 or 1990, depending who you talk to. And this was really discontinued in 2013. It was much older in terms of the CPUs and the architectures, and it went away a lot earlier. Now, you might still come across Series 9070s because it was quite a rugged design. And particularly, it was used in safety systems. So we'll talk about safety systems later. But if it's a non-safety system, then again, similar to the 9030, there are relatively straightforward upgrade options. So you do have to replace the entire chassis and all of the modules. But what we can do to make it easy, we have got a conversion rack. So the idea of the conversion rack is it allows you to keep the existing terminal blocks and then wire them to new harnesses, which can go to an RX3i. So I'll show you some slides in a minute, which explain how that works in terms of what the chassis looks like. But generally, it's very similar to the Series 9030, except it's just bigger. But with the RX3i, we can take those large applications. We've got the high performance. So the only times you'll come across problems is if it's serial communications. So again, they might need looking at. And also, we've got the Genius bus controller in the in the Series 9070. The bus controller is no longer available for the RX3i, but we do have what we call a Genius communications gateway. So if I show you how you can upgrade using this conversion chassis, it's like this. You've got the original controller, you remove the connectors, you take out the old chassis, you put the new chassis in, and then you bolt on an RX3i using these wiring harnesses, and then the conversion's complete. Downloading is very straightforward, no changes to the HMI SCADA. So again, people have done this on a very small shutdown. It's slightly more involved than the 9030, but not by much. You could almost do this in the lunchtime. Certainly, we've got people who did this over a weekend, and they had a 9070 on a Friday evening, and by the time the plant restarted on Monday morning, they'd upgraded. So pretty straightforward. Again, a few caveats about communications and so on, but generally quite straightforward to upgrade. Now, I don't know how many 9070s you'll come across. It was used for larger applications, again, good for process control as well as discrete control, but it was a lot more expensive and we didn't sell as many. I think we sold maybe 100,000 Series 9070s. So, it's not as common, but you may still come across it. This just goes through more detail of the previous slide. So we've got a video, actually, it's on YouTube somewhere. It's called 6 Steps to Modernizing a Series 9070 using the PACSystems RX3i conversion rack. And this just explains exactly what you do. Again, very straightforward to upgrade. And again, you've got that low risk situation where if anything goes wrong, you can just go back to the original 9070. So yeah, really nice to upgrade those. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you supposed to be sharing something? Because you talked about previous slide, but you're not sharing anything, are you?
You should be able to see my slide deck.
Sorry?
So I have got slides that I'm showing here. Did you see this one? If you can't see it, maybe I've had problems with Teams before where you have to leave Teams and go back in.
Oh, okay. With temporary, yeah.
Okay, can you see? I can see it, Moro.
Yeah, I can. With an error on my part. Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so the next thing, and I don't think you'll come across quite so many of those. When we introduced the PACSystems range, we had the idea that we wanted it to be the same as the 9030 and the 9070. So there would be an RX3i to replace the 9030 and an RX7i to replace the 9070. But with the way computer technology went, the RX3i was just as powerful as the RX7i, and it was half the price. So not many people bought the RX7i. So the RX7i, again, it was a big 6U chassis. It supported some high density IO as well as the original 9070 IO, but we didn't sell many. Again, we had issues about components and CPUs. There was the ROS issue again. So this was moved to mature status in 2016 and discontinued in 2017. Now, it's just possible you might come across this. One of the great things about the RX-7i, and also to some extent the 9070, was they had very good support for redundancy applications. So what you could do is you could use two CPUs in a hot standby arrangement, meaning that if one CPU failed or was turned off for maintenance, the other CPU could carry on running the plant. So we sold a few RX-7Is in high availability applications, but I don't think we sold that many overall, probably less than 50,000 of these. So worldwide, not that many compared to the Series 9030 or the RX-7i. So if you come across these, these are using blue, and it's all a solid metal construction. They're quite big, but I don't think they're very common. But the upgrading really is the same as upgrading a Series 9070. The architecture was similar, the programming was very similar. The only thing about the RX-7i is that it was sometimes used by people who wanted to install third-party modules using a backplane technology called VME, or Versa Modular Europe. Now, VME has gone away. That was another reason why we discontinued the RX-7i. But just sometimes you might find someone using an RX-7i with third-party VME modules. I actually had one recently, which was an oil and gas application put in by one of our partners. I can't remember how long ago, but a long time ago. But they were using some special VME modules, which gave them some high-density I/O. And what we have to do with those is those old VME modules have to be replaced. But generally, that's the same sort of upgrade strategy as a 9070. You've got the conversion chassis, so you can reuse a lot of the existing I/O modules. And in terms of the other modules, it's just replaced like for like. So new chassis, new power supply, new CPU, and then new I/O modules according to what the requirements are. Now, there is one thing about this conversion chassis which I found. It's a great idea if you want to reduce the risk. And this is also true of this 9070 upgrade. One of the challenges I find is it is quite expensive. I think it's about $2,500 for the chassis. Plus, you've got to buy all the PLC components on top. Then you've got to buy the wiring harnesses, which are a couple of $100 each. A lot of people say, well, that's really expensive. So if they're willing to live with the risk, you can do away with the conversion chassis and you can just rip and replace to our latest RX3i technology. So that does mean rewiring all the I/O. Of course, you keep the application code, so that's good. But for some people who say, well, I like your conversion chassis, but it's too expensive, if you're willing to take the risk, you can just turn the system off and rip and replace. So you've always got that option. So if we move on, looking at application modernization, that uses Pack Machine Edition. So with Pack Machine Edition, you can take the legacy code. We've got direct import of our old Series 90 applications and RX-7i applications from whatever they were written with. There's the old DOS Logic Master package, which is no longer supported. And we can still provide that DOS software, but you're going to struggle to run it. It won't install on any modern operating system. It does need the full DOS Windows underneath. So I think the last operating system that supported that was probably Windows 95. So you could potentially run it, but it's going to be tough. So if you wanted to try Logic Master, you can still get it. But for most people, they'll have Logic Master, they'll have the applications, and then it's just a set of files on the hard disk. If you've got one of the later applications, CC90, that one's not really available anymore. It needed a special authorization. But again, we can import the projects that CC90 used. And then the other one is VersaPro. VersaPro, we've got that. You could install it. It will run for 4 days in demo mode. And that will give you enough time to maybe do some work. But generally, you don't need those old applications because you can import everything into the latest Pack Machine Edition, and then you can modify as required. So there might be legacy code you don't need. There might be additional instructions and diagnostics you want to add. Maybe you want to rewrite some of the code, add more analytics. So you've got all the benefits of using Pack Machine Edition. And then, that means that you can use the latest controllers, or you can continue to maintain the old controllers. And that's all done using our Pack Machine Edition software. Another question?
Yes, regarding the programming of the PLCs. So you have support for the 5 languages, the standard languages, right? I also see that you have C and MATLAB. Is that it? And
Yeah,
you can
so
convert
we
between
only
any
support
of these
3.
languages?
We support 3 of the IEC 61131 Part 3 languages because we don't support SFC because we found that no one was using it. We did have a project to put SFC into Pack Machine Edition, but we've never had any real demand for it. So we support ladder logic, structured text, and function block diagram. And there's also instruction list, which we don't support because, again, no one uses that. You know, we did have instruction list a long time ago, but everyone wanted to use ladder logic. So what you'll find is probably 99% or more of the applications written in the legacy PLCs, yeah, they will be written in ladder. Very few people used SFC. If you do come across SFC, then the way that works, I've got some slides on that later, you can use a lot of the existing logic from SFC because that uses an underlying ladder logic, and then you just need to overlay the sequence on top of it. So in the new PLCs, yeah, it's function block diagram, structured text. We do have support for C blocks, and with C blocks, you can migrate or export from MATLAB, and you can run a MATLAB C program. You can compile it and run it directly inside our PLC.
Okay, that's good.
Another thing we've added is more function blocks. We've got a lot more process control function blocks, including things like advanced PID. We've got things like feed forward and lead lag and so on. So yeah, if you've got a complex control application, then you can do that more easily inside a PACSystems controller than you used to be able to do. And the other thing we've added with Pack Machine Edition for PACSystems PLCs, you can also do simulation and trending. So we've got some nice diagnostic tools there.
With the big PLCs, it's basically Delta V, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot like those now, yes. Okay, so if you want to do Genius I/O conversion, then we do have the option of using this Genius Communications Gateway. That's configured as a Profinet device. So it's quite straightforward to add a Profinet device using what we call the GSDML file. And then with that Profinet device, you can then map the I/O into the same I/O addresses that you used to use. So if you're upgrading even a very old legacy system using these big Genius blocks, and I think I've got a slide on that later, yeah, then again, you can keep the same I/O format, even if the underlying hardware changes. The same with things like old references using old I/O like Versamax on Genius. If you move it towards Profinet or later networks, you can use the same I/O addresses. So of course that means you don't need to rewrite your application code. So again, not many people use sequential function start of chart, but if you wanted to modernize that, we've got some guidelines here. So what I found with SFC, a lot of people use pre-processing and post-processing logic, which was all in ladder, so that can run unconverted. So all you need really is a scheme to handle the sequence. So that's just to handle all the steps and transitions. So I think that there's only one customer or maybe two customers I've come across using SFC. One used it for a high-level sequence, and we were able to rewrite that easily. Another one used it for a communications protocol, and we rewrote the communications protocol at a different level, so they were able to delete that SFC function block before they imported. So yeah, very few people using SFC. But if you do come across that, that's something we can investigate. So those are the PLCs. If we move on, then we can look at some of the old I/O. So what you often find is more and more people were moving towards distributed systems. So it started off, you had like a PLC, and it would be the PLC, the CPU, and the I/O modules all in one chassis, and maybe some local expansion. So increasingly people move to remote I/O. We did have something called field control. This came out in 1992. And the idea was with our Genius I/O LAN, which was a single twisted pair cable with shield, you could connect this field control I/O to the PLC, and then you could have distributed I/O. So people started using field control quite a while ago. This was discontinued, but it's replaced by something called Versamax. So Versamax has very similar part numbers. It has the same sort of I/O modules. So if you were replacing, it's quite straightforward to just rip out the field control I/O and replace it with Versamax. And you can even keep the Genius I/O network. So that old legacy network, which we introduced in the mid-1980s, that is still supported today by the either by using Versamax with the Genius bus controller, depending what PLC you're using, or we can use that Genius communications gateway. And that means that, again, you can modernize quite a few of these old applications without having to rewire. And this is a challenge we find. Some customers who are using Genius IO, they've put in several hundred or thousand meters of cable, very expensive to replace that. So, we can still reuse that existing Genius IO LAN a lot of the time. Okay, so what is Genius? Well, Genius is actually two things. Genius is the IO cable itself, which is that single twisted pair. And there was a range of different cables that we supported depending on how fast you wanted to go. It ran up to 152.6 kilobits over the biggest cable, and it went up to 2.2 kilometers. And then you could also get fiber repeaters, but we didn't sell those. They were third-party items. But you can imagine if you want to run in 2,000 meters of Ethernet cable, that's quite expensive and quite complicated. So a lot of people want to keep that Genius IO cable. The other part of Genius was what we call the Genius IO blocks. So these are about the size of a house brick. They're about, just trying to think how big they are. They're about 25 centimeters or 20 to 25 centimeters high. About 8 to 10 centimeters wide, 8 to 10 centimeters deep. And these were some very powerful IO blocks. And these were used in a lot of applications. Again, people wanted that distributed IO. So that was one reason for using them. The other reason for using them was they had lots of advanced diagnostics. So as well as having diagnostics on the cable and the block level, these could do diagnostics down to the IO device. So they could tell you if an output was able to trigger, or if an input was open circuit or short circuit. So right down to the IO wiring. So we can still do those diagnostics. And the way we do that is you would have to upgrade to PROFINET, and then we can use something called the CEP, which is the Carrier Expansion PROFINET module. So a wide variety of options. What we would do is we would look at the Genius cable. So you might then replace the legacy PLC with an RX3i. And then instead of using the Genius bus controller, which was the old thing that we used for communications, you'd replace that with PROFINET. And then you would use what's called this Genius Communications Gateway to link to your Genius LANs. And then with that Genius Communications Gateway, you can keep the original devices. Of course, the risk is, if you've got an old Genius block, maybe it was installed in the mid-1990s, it's 20 years old now. How long is it going to last? And they do last a long time, but eventually they're going to wear out. So then what you can do is you can go to this next slide here, and we can replace the old Genius block with a new, more compact block. So this uses the same RX3 IO modules, but it's on a very compact carrier that runs on Ethernet using PROFINET. So you'd have to replace the Genius IO LAN, but this allows you then to upgrade those Genius IO blocks. And one nice thing about this is, because the Genius IO LAN and the Ethernet LAN can run side by side, you could upgrade each Genius block one by one. So you don't have to do a full rip and replace over the period of, say, a shutdown. You could maybe replace one Genius block when you've got some time, then replace another Genius block, and you could keep replacing those blocks until you've replaced all of them, and now you've got a modern Ethernet and PROFINET based system. There's other options as well. It doesn't have to use this RX3i IO with the CEP. You could also use RSTI EP, which is our newest IO range. So that one again would work on PROFINET. Again, you'd have to upgrade the network and you'd have to rewire, but you could do that device by device. So it doesn't have to be like a big bang approach, as we call it. You could do a flexible, scalable modernization over time. Now, one thing with Genius was it was a core part of what we call GMR. So GMR was a combined system using a combination of Series 9070 PLCs and Genius IO. And GMR stands for Genius Modular Redundancy. Now, in principle, upgrading the Series 9070 and the Genius IO is straightforward, except GMR was intended for safety systems. So if you've got a safety application, such as emergency shutdown or fire and gas, you can't just replace it with current hardware. You also have to look at the safety side of it. So GMR, this was something that was sold for SIL 2 and SIL 3 applications, based on Series 9070 and Genius IO, and it was really discontinued when we stopped selling for Series 9070. but it continues to be used. And one of the reasons that people continue to use it is safety systems are hard to modernize, and you don't want to modernize them because as soon as you touch anything on the safety system, you've got to recertify the entire system to make sure it still meets SIL 2 or SIL 3 or whatever it is. We can continue to support existing systems, but there's no spares available. So, eventually people are going to run out of spares and they're going to have to upgrade. And I've been doing a lot of work with safety systems over the years. We did have something called the Mark 6 CS, which we could upgrade to, but now we would use our latest system, which is called PACSystems SafetyNet. So this is a new system, but it's based on PACSystems RX3i using the Edge controller, also known as the CPE 400 or CPL 410. It uses Versamax IO, and then we've got standard architectures. We've got pre-configured safety blocks, so it makes it very easy to replace a legacy system using this new system. So you'll see it's all yellow. So yellow plastic, yellow modules, yellow overlays. So it's a proper safety system. It meets SIL 2, which is what's required for most applications. So if that's ESD or fire and gas to SIL 2. If you need SIL 3, then we would probably go to our PSS colleagues and look at a Delta V SIS. But this is a very straightforward solution to upgrade the existing GMR systems. Okay, now you might come across PAC 8000. PAC 8000 is the most acquisition, but the nice thing about the PAC 8000 range was it had a very rugged controls and very high and low temperatures. So we could go -40 to +70, and it was very often used in the Middle East and the Far East, where you had high temperatures. And the great thing about that PAC 8000 range was, it supported those high and low temperatures and the ruggedness. But again, this was an acquisition we acquired from MTL in 2008. And we had, again, this ROS compatibility issues. It uses an old PowerPC CPU, which is gone. So, again, 2017, we decided to discontinue that. Now with this one, this isn't programmed using PAC Machine Edition. It's got its own PAC 8000 workbench. So if you're upgrading one of these, you would have to rewrite the application, but the upgrade on the CPUs, you can replace the CPU, but keep the IO. The IO we still manufacture. So we refresh the IO. Very similar, I think, if you've seen a Delta V, it's very similar to the M series IO, I think it is. So effectively the same modules, but a different head-end controller. So we continue to make those IO modules, all fully ROS compatible, but you would have to replace the CPU and you would need to rewrite the application. If people want to maintain going forwards, we can still provide that PAC 8000 workbench for programming, but it's only supported on Windows 7, which is problematic. And again, no enhancements planned. So so a lot of people are looking to modernize and upgrade. So what you would do is you would replace the CPU with our Edge controller, the CPE 400 or the CPL 410. You'd replace the PAC 8000 CPU with a Profinet scanner, but you can keep the IO. So, again, low risk. You could always go back to the original system if your upgrade didn't work. Now, PAC 8000 came in two versions. There was the standard PAC 8000, and then there was also something called SafetyNet, which I'm calling Legacy SafetyNet here. So it was the same CPUs, and I don't have a photo of them, the same CPUs, but with a yellow label, and that was used for SIL 2 applications. So again, that all went away around the same time. You've still got issues with the workbench only being used on Windows 7. If you come across a legacy SafetyNet application, then again, it's PACSystems SafetyNet. So new CPU, new IO, and you would need to rewrite the application. But the benefit is by coming to Emerson, we understand both systems. So we can provide a more seamless upgrade rather than if someone was just going to rip and replace. In fact, as an estimation that I'm just working on one there, we're upgrading a legacy safety system in the North Sea. The operator of the rig, they went to one of our competitors and they got a quote for something like $1.5 million to completely rip out and replace the old safety system with a new safety system. Our quote comes in at something like $250,000. So we're like, 1/6 of the price to do an upgrade. And part of that was the competitor, they have to eliminate risk, whereas we know what's involved. So again, we can offer a safer, lower risk solution and often much cheaper using this new PACSystems SafetyNet.
Even internally, this competes with Delta V. In some of our projects, before we were introduced to the PACSystems lineup.
Yeah.
We used to offer, Delta V as when the client would need a big PLC, for example. But now with this portfolio, we see that it's much more competitive sometimes to get the PLC. But then it's internal competition with the systems view, and you understand. So it's and I don't think we have PAC 8000 here in Angola. Maybe Roy can correct me,
You would
but I
have
don't think we
to,
have that.
what you have to do is, Moro, and Steve can confirm, PAC 8000 used to be sold via, is it General Monitors or one of those detector companies which used to use it as their internal PLC? Steve?
Okay.
Yeah,
And
it was badged and resold by a lot of people for a lot of safety applications. So yeah, quite a few. And even the IO, like I say, the PAC 8000 IO was also used by Delta V as the M series IO. So but there's a lot of it out there.
so what you have to do, moreover, the letter which I gave you has the PAC 8000 written on it. We have seen today in Kuwait Oil Company, the FNG detectors are using PAC 8000 extensively. So don't discount that at all. Because PAC 8000 is a 2008 acquisition, the install base data is not very clear. But it would be there. So, when you are sharing the letter with the models, don't discount this because they may land up somewhere. We have seen it in Sonatrach, we have seen it in Tunisia. It is there, especially in oil and gas. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we compete that much with Delta V because our PACSystems SafetyNet is SIL 2, whereas the Delta V SIS is SIL 3. And the big difference is if people want to buy a system, then we can provide Delta V as an engineered solution, like a turnkey solution. Whereas with our PLC products, we're generally selling those as parts. So, we're looking at our network of system integrators and OEMs to do the work for us in terms of actually integrating these. So there's a big difference between the way we work as discrete automation and the way that the Delta V team works. It's about the way the products are packaged and sold. It's the sort of applications they go into. And we are very different in the way we operate. So there's very little competition. In fact, we are finding, PSS is considering to use us for SIL 2 applications because Delta V is SIL 3, which is a lot more expensive. And also then with all the impact partners, they're also looking at PLCs for skids where a DCS is just too expensive. Yeah, for example, you've got the PK controller and that has a price of about $50,000 plus. Yeah, we can provide something that's probably almost as powerful and just as good for control applications, and it's maybe $5,000 to $10,000. So between a tenth and a fifth of the price. So yeah, there's not much overlap there.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to show. I mean, if I send you the slide deck, there's quite a bit of backup information here. Like there's another 50 slides to go, but it talks about how the GCG works. It talks about how Genius networks work. There's a lot of information on like safety systems like GMR. So we'll keep that as backup. But certainly, I think the idea is, modernization is quite straightforward. So if you do come across any of these discontinued products on the left, here is our modernization path on the right. And then our team, people like me in the pre-sales team, we can provide you with more technical information if you need it. And ultimately, it will require a project. Someone's going to have to decide what sort of upgrade is required. But the benefit that we offer is easier modernization using Emerson equipment because we know all the old stuff as well as the new stuff. And in many cases, we can keep a lot of the old equipment. We can either keep the IO. In many cases, we can keep the IO wiring. We can keep the original application, or at least large parts of it. So the risk of going with Emerson to upgrade is much less than if you were going to rip and replace it with a competitor's PLC. So what do you think? Any questions?
Okay, that I understood. What I think we'll do is we'll try to get an upgrade going so that I can, follow it more closely and
Okay,
get more hands-on with the migration solutions. Sounds
sure.
good?
Well, feel free to come to me on the technical side, and then of course, Gaurav can help you on the commercial side.
So, Moro, since you are a hands-on man and you are our point of contact, the idea was that the first level of discussion with the clients there will be you, because we don't have feet in the ground. And today the idea was to give you an idea like what was the 9030, what was the 9070, how it gets upgraded to 3xi. Now, are you comfortable talking to the clients about these migrations, about what is the legacy, which is where? That's the intent of this presentation, Maro.
Yes, I think we can get going with the first clients on presenting them the options based on what they have installed. Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect. So thanks
Great.
a lot. I did a record of this so that you can also read and check on it. Obviously, Steve will send you the deck. We do have a unwritten rule, Moro, that we don't attack each other's install base, which is sys and us. Since
We
you're
don't what?
common for
I
both
didn't get it. Sorry.
we have an unwritten rule that we don't touch each other's install base since you are
Mm-hmm.
common, yeah. So
Yeah.
now that
No, these were actually for new projects. The client asked, for example, they had a safety PLC, if I remember correctly, that was burned out, and as a replay in the proposal, we wanted to propose a new one, but on one side you had the PSS with Delta V, much more expensive, and on the other side you had the PLCs. And then I just wanted to when I got the estimations from both sides, it was a no-brainer. But then Leon left, and we just went with Delta V.
that's
But
okay.
it's
It
much
is a
more
step by
expensive getting Delta V as a PLC. So
Yeah, but it's just that, we try to not overlap each other. So one first foremost thing, Moro, is to look at our install base. As I said, Angola has a large install base. We haven't actually done any migration of any systems in Angola till date.
okay.
So other than the one which I've shared with you for Samoil, where there is a migration of running via Tunisia on Angola, there is no other. While we know there is a massive install base, I will not say massive, but there is an install base. So the first thing is you get the install base, you get the backup of the software, the PME. You need to get the PME backup so that Steve or his team can look at the backup, and then we do the migration internal configuration, BOQ, and then we make a proposal to you. So this is step 2, but presently the step 1 is to get you familiarized with our product lines, migration plans, and you can start running after all our install base there. Yeah, you had a question? Yeah, Moro, we can close the call now. Is that fine with you? I think his network had a problem. Moro, we can't hear you, huh?